Seven-time Winston Cup champion and former Daytona 500 winner Dale Earnhardt has died from a crash suffered in Sunday's Daytona 500.
Dale Earnhardt was one of the most fearless and skilled drivers in NASCAR history, a man whose name still echoes through racing lore. But the crash that took his life is shrouded in as much mystery as shock, raising questions that have haunted fans and experts alike. How could a driver so experienced meet such a devastating end on one of racing's most famous tracks? What really happened in those final seconds? Was it a tragic accident or something more? The harrowing details of that moment reveal chilling truths about the sport's dangers and the razor-thin line between victory and disaster. The fatal impact. On February 18, 2001, during the final lap of the Daytona 500, Dale Earnhardt's car struck the outside retaining wall in a violent crash that instantly silenced the roaring crowd. The impact was sudden, forceful, and deeply shocking, especially given Earnhardt's decades of experience at the highest level of stock car racing. He was a driver known for precision under pressure, sharp instincts, and a remarkable ability to control situations that often seemed beyond control. Yet, in this moment, none of that could prevent the high-speed collision with the barrier. In an instant, one of NASCAR's most legendary careers came to a sudden and devastating end, leaving fans, teams, and fellow drivers in complete disbelief. The crash occurred in the final turn, during the final seconds of one of motorsport's most closely contested finishes. The Daytona 500 is often decided in chaotic bursts of speed and strategy, and this race was no exception. Cars were tightly packed, drafting and jostling for position as the checkered flag approached. Earnhardt, known for his aggressive and fearless driving style, was focused on defending his place when contact and positioning in the pack created a chain reaction that sent him toward the outside wall. At nearly 180 miles per hour, the force behind the impact was catastrophic, instantly drawing concern from officials, drivers, and spectators alike. What happened in those final seconds has been analyzed repeatedly over the years, largely because of how abruptly control was lost. Television cameras captured the moment, but the footage initially provided little clarity, only brief motion, followed by the sudden, violent impact. There was no extended warning, no visible struggle to recover the car, just a rapid transition from competitive racing to tragedy. The conditions suggested a rare and unforgiving combination of speed, positioning, and timing that left no opportunity for correction once the chain of events began. Emergency crews reached Earnhardt's vehicle within moments, but accessing him proved difficult due to the severity of the wreckage. The atmosphere at Daytona International Speedway shifted almost instantly from anticipation to stunned silence, as responders worked urgently at the scene. Despite rapid medical attention and immediate transport to a nearby hospital, Earnhardt was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The news spread quickly, sending shockwaves throughout NASCAR and the global sports community. The crash became a defining and transformative moment in racing history. Beyond the loss of a legendary figure, it forced an immediate and serious reassessment of safety standards, vehicle design, and the inherent risks of high-speed competition. Questions emerged almost at once about whether existing protections were sufficient and what changes might have altered the outcome. In the days and months that followed, detailed investigations carefully reconstructed the final lap, revealing a complex interaction of speed, contact, and circumstance that came together in an irreversible instant. The findings would go on to reshape NASCAR's approach to safety and leave a lasting legacy on the sport, fundamentally changing how racing dangers were understood and addressed. Yet, before revealing the fuller explanation behind that shattering collision, it is important to understand the context in which this crash happened, how Daytona and the 500-day stakes created the scene for this heartbreaking finale. The Daytona 500 context. The Daytona 500 is often called the Super Bowl of stock car racing, the most prestigious and fiercely contested event on the NASCAR calendar. Every year, drivers push themselves and their cars to the limit on the 2.5-mile superspeedway, trying to outmaneuver opponents in a desperate battle for glory. The 2001 race was no different, carrying enormous pressure and high expectations for participants and fans alike. In the days leading up to the race, teams finely tuned their vehicles for the unique challenges of Daytona's high banks and long straightaways. The track's design promotes drafting, a technique where cars line up closely to reduce air resistance, making for some of the fastest and most dangerous racing conditions in the sport. These factors create intense moments where split-second decisions determine survival or disaster. The event was marked by aggressive competition throughout its nearly 4-hour duration. Dale Earnhardt, already a 7-time NASCAR Winston Cup champion known for his tenacity, was among those who had to navigate not just the course, but the physical and mental toll of relentless racing. Every lap brought faster speeds and closer quarters, raising the stakes with each turn. As the race neared the end, Earnhardt found himself sort of racing up in the front, his sights fixed on victory. This was a man that was experienced in handling high-pressure moments, not just any driver, someone who built his reputation on clutch performances and risky, decisive moves. But still, the conditions were not friendly, and the margin for error got thin real fast under those bright lights and the loud crowd. The weather that day felt pretty typical for Florida in February, cool but clear, no real environmental curveballs or hazards to blame. Still, Daytona is Daytona, and the mix of speed, close quarters, and pure ambition makes a situation that is uniquely precarious. The final laps tend to turn into the most chaotic stretch, where you need razor-sharp attention and reflexes that happen before you even think. Earnhardt's team and the other contenders knew the danger, but the chase for triumph always seems to push past fear. Drivers also know that one single moment can decide a career, or erase it completely. At Daytona, it's about balancing restraint and aggression. That tug-of-war is what drove every one of those fast, hard maneuvers through the race. The stakes were huge, and the Daytona 500 had this nearly gladiatorial vibe, which set the stage for what happened in those last critical seconds. Drivers were trading positions inch by inch, dreams crashing into trouble around each bend. In that hot, charged air, Earnhardt's style was at once a strength and, as was going to become painfully obvious, also a weakness. The final lap would ultimately expose just how thin the line was between control and catastrophe at that level of competition. The unique dynamics at Daytona, the speed, the tactics, the history of fierce competition, set the stage for an unforgettable and tragic confrontation. Understanding this environment is essential before delving into how Dale Earnhardt's approach to racing factored so profoundly into the events that followed. Earnhardt's racing style. Dale Earnhardt was renowned not just for his victories, but for a driving style marked by calculated aggression and relentless determination. Nicknamed the Intimidator, he was known to push the limits of both his car and his rivals, excelling in close-quarters racing where few others dared to tread. His style earned respect and fear in equal measure. He was the master of controlled chaos on the track. Earnhardt's approach involved an uncompromising mindset: move forward, defend position fiercely, and never back down. He thrived in high-pressure situations where the risk was greatest, using his experience to read competitors and exploit openings others might avoid. This aggressive driving was a key part of his success and brand, but also placed him in precarious situations. He was legendary for his ability to draft skillfully, staying close behind other cars to reduce drag and maintain high speeds. This technique requires intense concentration and quick reflexes, with mere inches separating vehicles that could easily collide. Earnhardt's confidence in his drafting and positioning made him a force to be reckoned with, especially on superspeedways like Daytona. While some critiqued his aggressive tactics as reckless, Earnhardt viewed his style as necessary survival in the brutal world of NASCAR. He believed that to win, drivers had to take risks others wouldn't. His style wasn't about recklessness, but calculated daring. knowing when to push and when to hold. This calculated aggression sometimes led to these clashes on the track, fueling rivalries and, shaping his reputation. Other drivers seemed to know that racing against Earnhardt meant expecting the unexpected and defending themselves relentlessly, like no pause at all. His sharp instincts and fearless attitude really cemented his spot among the sport's elite, but it also walked this fine line between control and catastrophe, kind of a hairline sort of thing. In the laps leading up to the 2001 Daytona 500 crash, Earnhardt's approach matched this philosophy. He basically positioned himself where he thought victory could happen, even if that meant battling for inches from others and the wall. The tension in those final moments felt like years of honing this style, more or less all stacked up right there. His experience and skill were unmatched, though the risks that come with this kind of driving left very little wiggle room when things went bad. The collision that ended his life was, in a way, both a direct consequence of that daring approach and also the track's environment, plus the day's own circumstances. Earnhardt's racing style was integral to who he was, both as a competitor and as this sort of legend. It defined his career, and tragically, it played a crucial part in the events that unfolded in those final fateful seconds. The relentless drive that fueled his success also set the stage for a devastating outcome, one that would not only end a life, but change the sport itself. The role of vehicle safety. At the time of Dale Earnhardt's crash, NASCAR's safety technology was evolving, but had not yet reached the levels that would come in the wake of tragedy. Cars were built with strong steel frames, and helmets and seat belts were standard. But many critical safety devices now seen as essential were either rudimentary or absent. The balance of speed, durability, and driver protection was still a work in progress, with the sport reliant on ever-improving but imperfect innovations. One of the most significant safety features lacking in 2001 was the head and neck support device, or HANS device, which stabilizes the head during a crash to prevent severe trauma. Though developed earlier, the HANS was not yet mandatory in NASCAR, and Earnhardt was not wearing one that day. The sudden deceleration in his crash meant his neck absorbed extreme force, a condition that the device alone could have greatly mitigated. The car's structure itself played a complex role. While the impact-absorbing design was improving, the stock cars still had vulnerabilities, especially at speeds near 200 miles per hour. Earnhardt's Chevrolet Monte Carlo was designed for durability and performance, but the energy from the collision transferred violently to the driver. The extent to which the car's interior could protect him against such a force was limited by the technology of that era. Seat belts and window nets were critical, but not foolproof. The 5-point harness system grabbed the driver firmly, reducing movement, and the window nets helped prevent limbs from protruding during accidents. Yet, these measures couldn't eliminate the internal forces acting on Earnhardt's body during the crash. Medical experts later indicated that the blunt force trauma sustained was lethal, despite these precautions. NASCAR cars also lacked some of the modern security features that channel energy away from the driver, such as energy-absorbing foam barriers inside the walls and safer barriers that cushion impacts. At Daytona, the retaining walls were still made of concrete, which stopped cars abruptly with little give. This harsh surface exacerbated the damage to cars and drivers when collisions occurred. Fuel cells and fire suppression systems had improved a bit to lower post-impact fire worries, and even so, Earnhardt's car did not catch fire. The whole crash violence was still made obvious by that instant stop into the unforgiving concrete. The upgrades in vehicle fire safety, though vital, couldn't really block the physical trauma that shows up in collisions like Earnhardt's. In the months and years right before the crash, NASCAR kept looking for safer racing methods, but they had not fully rolled out a whole bunch of changes yet. The near-universal shock after Earnhardt died created a new urgency, but at that exact time, safety protocols and the gear were still sort of trying to keep up with the speed of both technology and the competitive pressure. Earnhardt's fatal injury triggered a broader industry reckoning, showing that even the most solid cars and the best available safety gear back then could not promise true protection. His crash was a severe reminder that the sport's drive toward speed sometimes outruns the development of life-saving measures. Figuring out what the cars could and couldn't do to protect drivers that day helps explain how this disastrous outcome happened even after decades of progress. Still, it wasn't only the cars. It was also the track layout and the barriers that shaped how that grim moment unfolded. The stark contrast between the machinery designed to save lives and the unforgiving surface it collided with was crucial in magnifying the tragedy. Track design and hazards. Daytona International Speedway is a legendary racing venue, known for its high banks and fast, sweeping turns that challenge even the most skilled drivers. The track's design encourages extreme speeds and close racing, creating both thrilling competition and significant risk. The concrete retaining walls that line the course, designed to contain cars within the circuit, become indisputable hazards in any collision. The track's steeply banked turns allow cars to maintain near-top speed without slowing much, but also leave little margin for error. At nearly 200 miles per hour, a loss of control or contact between cars can send a vehicle careening into the walls with catastrophic impact. Daytona's design prioritizes speed and spectacle, but the unforgiving concrete barriers give no room for the energy of a crash to dissipate safely. Safer barriers, or steel and foam energy reduction barriers, which absorb and reduce crash impact forces, were not yet installed around Daytona's walls in 2001. Without these cushion-like protections, the full force of a collision was transmitted directly to the car and driver. This harsh surface transformed what might have been a survivable crash into a lethal one. The concrete barriers themselves are fixed and rigid, providing containment but little absorption. For drivers like Earnhardt, hitting the wall at high speed meant coming to an immediate and violent stop. The energy had nowhere to go but into the vehicle, and ultimately the driver, magnifying injuries exponentially. Daytona's long straightaways funnel enormous energy into the turns, where accidents are more likely due to tight packs of cars jockeying for position. The proximity of the walls makes escaping such impacts nearly impossible once control is lost. On that fatal lap, Earnhardt's car hit the outer wall at a critical angle and velocity, leaving no chance for correction or mitigation. The placement and the way Daytona built its barriers sort of lined up with the usual motorsport habits back then, but they were clearly left behind by what was improving elsewhere. At the time, a lot of tracks were still using concrete walls or those tire barriers that in practice give only limited shielding. Daytona's construction still hadn't really caught up to the newer safety ideas, the ones that leaned more on energy-absorbing materials and various small engineering innovations. Since NASCAR races like the Daytona 500 move huge packs of cars, racing only inches apart at blistering speeds, crashes frequently end up involving more than one driver and more than one vehicle. Still, the location and the particular nature of Earnhardt's hit made the whole thing feel different. The intensity of the contact with that unforgiving concrete wall shocked the racing world, and it also drove extra, closer scrutiny. Trying to stop that kind of impact at Daytona is hard because of the track's own layout. The same parts that make it famous are the parts that raise the danger. The steep banking, fast curves, and the concrete boundary structures all combine into sort of a perfect storm. If anything goes wrong, even slightly, that painful blend of design and situation really shows how Daytona, the biggest stage for NASCAR excitement, also became a deciding factor in what turned out to be the most devastating crash in its history. The balance between spectacle and safety would never be the same after that day, as the sport grappled with the reality that even the most celebrated tracks could be unforgiving arenas. Immediate medical response. The moment Dale Earnhardt's car collided with the wall, emergency responders immediately sprang into action, fully aware of the seriousness of the situation. Track safety crews and paramedics rushed toward the crash site within seconds, confronting the difficult task of reaching a heavily damaged vehicle at the center of a high-speed final lap incident. In that environment, time was everything. Every passing moment mattered in the effort to assess Earnhardt's condition and provide life-saving care. Race officials quickly stopped the event and coordinated with emergency teams, while drivers circled the track under caution. In the stands and along pit road, confusion and concern spread rapidly as spectators tried to understand what had just occurred. Despite the chaos, the response effort remained structured and disciplined, guided by protocols developed specifically for high-speed racing emergencies. The immediate priority was clear: stabilize the driver and prepare him for urgent transport. Reaching Earnhardt inside the wrecked car proved extremely challenging. The impact had severely compromised the vehicle's structure, limiting access points and making it difficult for responders to safely maneuver. Emergency personnel had to work carefully around twisted metal and debris, balancing urgency with precision to avoid causing additional harm. Every movement was deliberate, reflecting the complexity of extraction in motorsport crash scenarios. Once Earnhardt was finally removed from the vehicle, he was quickly placed into an ambulance and transported to Halifax Medical Center, located roughly 10 miles from Daytona International Speedway. Ahead of his arrival, hospital staff had been alerted, allowing trauma teams to prepare for immediate intervention. Despite the rapid transport and the full mobilization of medical resources, the injuries he sustained were ultimately beyond recovery. At the hospital, medical teams worked intensively in an effort to stabilize him, using advanced trauma protocols and life support systems. However, the severity of the impact left little room for intervention. Dale Earnhardt was pronounced dead shortly after reaching the facility, bringing a sudden and devastating end to one of NASCAR's most iconic careers. In the aftermath, the response efforts were widely examined for what they revealed about motorsport safety at the time. The professionalism and speed of the rescue teams were widely acknowledged, but the incident also exposed limitations in crash response systems and highlighted areas where improvements were needed, particularly in dealing with high-impact, complex injuries. Experts and officials across the sport agreed that incidents like this underscored the need for continuous advancement in safety infrastructure and emergency preparedness. Earnhardt's crash became a catalyst for renewed focus on medical response times, equipment standards, and on-track rescue procedures across NASCAR venues. Even with highly trained personnel acting as quickly as possible, the outcome served as a stark reminder that some injuries exceed the limits of even the best emergency response systems. The emotional impact on the NASCAR community was immediate and profound, emphasizing the human cost behind the sport's speed and intensity. That sense of urgency and loss ultimately laid the groundwork for deeper investigation into the crash itself, driving long-term changes in safety standards that would reshape the future of racing. The unfolding inquiry into the tragedy would uncover complexities and controversies, challenging assumptions and pushing the limits of transparency in the sport. Investigation and findings. In the wake of Dale Earnhardt's death, multiple investigations were launched to determine the precise causes of the crash and whether any preventable factors contributed to the fatal outcome. NASCAR, alongside independent experts and forensic teams, sought to piece together evidence from the wreckage, eyewitness accounts, video footage, and vehicle telemetry. One key focus was the analysis of the car's damage and Earnhardt's physical injuries, aimed at reconstructing the forces involved in the impact. Investigators examined whether mechanical failure, driver error, or external factors played a role in the events leading up to the collision. This comprehensive approach reflected the stakes, not just understanding what happened, but preventing future tragedies. The investigation revealed that Earnhardt sustained a basilar skull fracture, a traumatic brain injury caused by the rapid deceleration of his head and neck during the crash. This injury was ultimately fatal and underscored the vulnerability of drivers to forces generated in high-speed crashes without adequate neck restraint devices in use at the time. Analysis of the crash angles and vehicle positions suggested that Earnhardt's car made contact with another competitor's vehicle prior to hitting the wall, a common occurrence in late-race pack racing. This contact likely contributed to his loss of control, though whether it was intentional or accidental was debated among teams and drivers. The incident was not viewed as a deliberate act of aggression, but rather a hazardous byproduct of the tight racing conditions. Further scrutiny focused on the car's safety equipment and the track environment, exposing the gaps that allowed such lethal trauma to occur. The absence of a mandatory head and neck support device, combined with the unforgiving concrete wall at Daytona, created conditions ripe for catastrophe. These findings fueled calls for immediate safety reforms within NASCAR. During those investigations, controversies started popping up, with people wondering if NASCAR had done enough to enforce the safety protocols. And at the same time, others were going back and forth about whether the track protections were really adequate. Families, fans, and experts all together were asking for transparency, accountability, and not just some vague answers, like they wanted something clear, not more ambiguity. In the end, the investigations pushed NASCAR to require the Hans device across all national series, and this move sharply reduced fatal neck injuries in the years that followed. Track safety improvements, like getting safer barriers installed at Daytona and various other venues, became a priority too, so the barriers could absorb impact energy more effectively and keep drivers safer. Earnhardt's death really turned into a moment everyone still talks about, more of a catalyst for systemic change. It arrived from the painful consequences of risks that were overlooked. The sport had to stare at the brutal reality that the love of speed and that fierce competition mindset has to be balanced with safety measures that are uncompromising every time. The results of these investigations reshaped NASCAR culture, actually embedding safety as a core value right alongside performance. It's a legacy that grew out of tragedy, but it also carries hope for the next generation of drivers. With new safety enhancements challenged by the memory of loss, the sport prepared to move forward, forever changed, yet still fiercely alive. Legacy and safety changes. Dale Earnhardt's tragic death sent shockwaves through the NASCAR community and the world of motorsports at large. The loss of such a revered figure forced the sport to confront uncomfortable truths about its safety standards. What had been accepted risks suddenly became urgent imperatives for change. Earnhardt's passing was a catalyst that fundamentally transformed how NASCAR approached driver safety from that moment onward. In the weeks that followed, NASCAR implemented new regulations that would have a lasting impact. The head and neck support, HANS device, which Earnhardt had not been using, became mandatory for all drivers in the top series. This device significantly reduces the chance of fatal neck injuries by limiting violent head movement during crashes. Its universal adoption revolutionized driver protection and set a new baseline for racing safety. Track safety also advanced rapidly. Daytona International Speedway and other major circuits began installing safer steel and foam energy reduction barriers, technology designed to absorb and reduce crash impact forces. These barriers replaced unforgiving concrete walls, providing drivers a much safer environment while maintaining the essence of high-speed racing. The sport acknowledged that the old methods of containment were no longer sufficient. Car design evolved in response to the lessons learned from Earnhardt's crash and others. NASCAR reinforced cockpit safety features and improved seatbelt harnesses. Teams and engineers worked closely with safety experts to construct vehicles that better shield drivers from injury while preserving competitive performance. The emphasis shifted decisively towards saving lives without compromising the sport's intense excitement. The culture of NASCAR transformed alongside these technical changes. Driver safety became a priority, embraced by officials, teams, and fans alike. What was once viewed as an unavoidable hazard became a challenge to be met with innovation and commitment. Earnhardt's legacy became about more than speed and victories. It became a symbol of progress born from heartbreak. His family and peers basically championed these reforms so that Dale Earnhardt's death would not be in vain and not just something sad to say. Memorials, tributes, all of that honored him not only as a racing legend, but also kind of like a beacon for change. That shared determination ended up pushing NASCAR into a fresh era where safety and competition feel way more aligned than they did before, at least in practical terms. The changes that came after Earnhardt's crash have saved countless lives since then, and it really shows how tragedy can turn into hope and progress. Every safety device and regulation kind of carries the weight of that unforgettable day at Daytona, reminding everybody involved that vigilance and innovation are still non-negotiable, no matter what. Even though the sport keeps on pushing limits, the overall balance has shifted quite a bit. The line between daring and danger is now drawn using lessons learned the hard way, but absorbed by an industry that is determined to protect its heroes, even when the racing gets intense. NASCAR today is safer because of what was lost. It's almost a testimony to how durable Earnhardt's life and death have stayed in the minds of people. In the end, Dale Earnhardt's crash reshaped the whole fabric of stock car racing, sparking improvements that keep echoing his passion and sacrifice. His story is a heavy reminder of how real the risks are, but it's also a strong force behind the sport's most important evolution, even when nobody wants to think about the cost. Dale Earnhardt's crash revealed the deadly risks of NASCAR and led to life-saving changes that continue to protect drivers today. His legacy is both a warning and a beacon for safer racing in a sport built on speed and courage. If you found this deep dive insightful, be sure to like and subscribe for more stories that uncover the truth behind the headlines.